Here's a look at a few options for powering this 60-ton locomotive. One option I looked at was, could I use a 45-ton? However, the wheelbase is actually much too short, even though the actual locomotive would fit inside the carcass of the 60-tonner. So this one wasn't really an option. It would be too much work to try and get a good looking locomotive sitting underneath there. Another option I looked at was using the frame of the 70-tonner from Bachmann. The locomotive itself is actually a fair amount bigger than the 60-ton. The body width is close, however its length is out of proportion, and the overall wheelbases would be quite a bit out of proportion. Trying to cut and push everything back together wasn't going to work. The drivetrain just doesn't really allow you to do that. So this version, the newer versions of the Bachmann, wouldn't work. The wheelbase is good. The wheelbase is, I think, just slightly larger on a 70-ton, but not enough that you would see the difference, and the wheelbase could have worked from there. Lots of interference with the frame against this frame, so it would have required a lot of modification. It wasn't really in the cards when I looked deeper into that. So the two options I looked at was using Stanton drivetrains or using the Tenshoto Evolution drivetrains. Both here have a 7-foot. I designed the side frames to fit around both the Stanton and the Tenshoto, so there's no problem there. They're both center set with the pivot, so it was no problem one sitting on top of the other. The design with the Stantons, so there's that 6-inch shift to give different truck wheelbases, just means that one side is a little bit longer than the other side relative to where these wheels are going to sit for 7-foot distance. In all, that just means that the larger end needs to be in the center, and that some of the underbody details here are unlikely that you can actually get them inside, versus the Tenshotos, which are designed just for 7-foot and has a much larger space in here, so the underbody details will be available. The Stantons come DCC ready, but you can use it for DC, whereas the Tenshotos, you'll have to make it into DCC if that's what you like, but it is DC ready. Both have side frame mounting points that can be used, not too hard to do that. For myself, I decided to go with the Tenshotos, as they were easier to get for my delivered to my place. Requires a little bit more work to get them to fit the frames over, just as there is axle extensions that come out and you have to grind them off, but that's pretty minor. And then if you want DCC, which this one is, there will be some modification work that you will have to do to get the proper wires set, Additionally, I wanted the details for the underbody on at least one of these locomotives. There's going to be several, and so you have more space here and clearance to do that. I have cut small acrylic spacers for the Tencioto Evolutions. Give it that proper height as it goes into the frame underneath. Going on here, it doesn't need those with the Stanton drives. They're built a little differently here on the pivot point. Just simplifies the procedure of mounting it to the frames that I provide. DC mode does not require any changes, so I recommend that the power actually be on the inside rather than the outside. Wires don't have to pull as much when they're turning sharper radiuses. Here's my DCC version, just awaiting a new chip. So I have modified the connections inside for the proper power to each side and the proper power pickup to each side. Color coded them accordingly and have it all set up one side to the other. The frame doesn't matter forward to backwards on it. The colors are there for convenience, of course, for any DCC work that you have to do. Some options for weights include some commercial 1/4 ounce weights that you can distribute around the frame area, making sure it doesn't interfere with the body. The body that I have now, of course, has the mounting pins, so this brass shims that I have in here would interfere. So you would just have to modify that. If you would like to put some brass shims in the center. The Tencioto drives do come with some steel weights, but generally they're as is just a little long for putting just in the frame, so you would end up having to modify some lengths, cut it down. There is room on the inside if you cut it down shorter, though its width is a little bit too much between. And you could put some brass shims in there just for some additional weight if you wanted to. You could take and cut your own frame, build it from scratch, use the one that I've provided as a template for height, width to fit inside, and then that frame would provide quite a bit of weight in there. For the Tencioto drives, notice that there's enough of a magnetic field that the screw becomes magnetized around the truck. And the steel weights will obviously lock down to the motor. I don't know what that will do to degrade the actual function of the motor and performance of that motor.